In 2025, Sri Lanka's FDIs were at 1.3 billion US dollars, with exports still dominated by tea and apparel. So while the recently announced IFC financing package of 166 million US dollars to the private sector does showcase confidence in Sri Lanka, what will it take to attract sustainable investment and stability? Bringing expertise in private, official and blended financing for climate and development, on Kaleidoscope Dialogues today is IFC Manager for Country Advisory and Economics South Asia, Gregory Smith, on what it will take to unlock potential for Sri Lanka. The IFC just announced a 166 million US dollar financing package for the private sector, primarily for women-led and agribusinesses. Does this mean Sri Lanka is being looked at favorably by funders like the IFC?
Absolutely, we're very excited about that investment, and it's sort of one of many we've been working on, and it's certainly linked to the strength of the economy over the last few years.
So you've said Sri Lanka needs at least a decade of stability to unlock sustainable growth. Now, given Sri Lanka's history of political and policy reversals, what specifically must change for this stability to be credible rather than aspirational?
That macro stability would be the backbone of an economy that grows much faster towards the aspirational rate of 7% per annum from around 4 or 5% today. And I think first of all, there needs to be a political commitment to maintaining macro stability. Legislation helps, strong laws that sort of prevent macro excesses in certain years, and a strong independent central bank that will provide the stability the economy needs. But added to that is a sort of demand from voters who want to vote for macro stability so that their businesses can thrive and they can maintain their welfare.
Investors remember shocks. So what signals would convince them that this recovery will stick?
You earn your trust back over the months, over the years, and what we've had so far is good reform and growth, certainly in 2024, certainly in 2025. And as these quarter prints keep coming in, showing the economy is positive growing, that will give investors the confidence, and also the fact that we're going to see structural reforms to cement some of the decent reforms. And at the moment, at least, the presence of the IMF for at least international investors is a real positive.
In a democracy that's under fiscal strain, how realistic is a long-term discipline?
It's not easy, but it's certainly doable. Lots of countries have achieved that. East Asian countries went through a lot of crises in the late 90s, and they decided not again. We're not going to be dependent on external debt in the same way. We're going to build up our buffers in the form of FX reserve, foreign exchange reserves, and we're going to implement policies. Another example in South Asia is India, who in the 90s decided it wasn't going to have another macro crisis and went about a serious amount of reforms that's led to macro stability since then.
So beyond tea and apparel, where should Sri Lanka be placing its next big bets on?
I think there's massive room for growth in agribusiness, going beyond the traditional crops to high value goods that can be consumed both here in Sri Lanka and be exported. There's so many flights these days to the Gulf and other geographies that could be packed with Sri Lankan goods for export. So rather than going to the supermarkets in Colombo and buying foreign agricultural produce, Sri Lankan produce can instead be in the supermarkets in the Gulf and other places. And I think that would be a real way of not only helping exports and strengthen the economy, but also lead to a lot of job creation.
Would Sri Lanka be better off sort of focusing on a few niche industries, few niche strengths, rather than trying to do everything and competing in the bigger sphere of things?
What first needs to happen is there needs to be efforts to secure a more competitive business environment. And I think if it were more competitive on that backbone of macro stability, then we could leave that up to entrepreneurs and business people to choose where they know they can make money and where they can make things more productive.
Do you think we really need to compete with India and Vietnam, countries like that? Or should we just play a different game altogether?
I think these are different countries. They're much larger countries, particularly India. So I think Sri Lanka needs to do what's best for Sri Lanka. And there are things that can be borrowed from other countries, ideas. But Sri Lanka certainly needs to be in value chains and competing with some products in both those markets.
Speaking of value chains, are global supply chain shifts a risk for Sri Lanka, or do you see it as an opportunity?
They're both. They create a lot of uncertainty, which make it difficult for investors in particular sectors. But at the same time, with big shifts in trade patterns, there are certain opportunities that Sri Lanka is well positioned to exploit.
What are the biggest mistakes that post-crisis countries make?
For countries that have defaulted on their sovereign debt, their national debt, this can occur once and then again and again. And there's this terrible term called serial defaulter for countries that haven't managed to get their finances in shape. And this can lead to depressed growth and a depressed economy for many years, even decades. So some countries have turned a page and reformed, and some countries have gone back into that trap of debt. And one hopes the reforms ongoing in Sri Lanka at the moment set the country on a path to better prosperity.
You have expertise in blended finance. Why has blended finance been harder to deploy here than expected?
Blended finance is great, but it's also in short supply. There's not a lot of it. So countries are competing with one another. And as a foreign investor, Sri Lanka is quite a tricky place to do business. So it's easier to find bankable projects in other geographies. But I think there's work that can happen here to attract investors better and secure a bigger slice of the of concessional financing.
What would investors look for if they're looking at Sri Lanka?
Investors are looking for a country where the exchange rate, the growth, inflation isn't swinging up and down to a large extent every 2-3 years. They're looking for a bit of stability so they can look ahead. They're looking for a credit rating that they can benchmark country risk and reduce their cost of capital. And then they're looking for a business environment that's friendly, and they're able to come here and set up and diffuse knowledge and technology and work with Sri Lankan firms to create jobs.
5 years from now, what would real success look like for Sri Lanka's economy?
I think it would be another 3 years of macro stability, adding to the 2 already. I think cheaper electricity, renewable electricity would really help. I think it would be great if we could move around the country faster, particularly to the north, with better infrastructure. I think, and with all these things, I think that would mean less Sri Lankans would migrate abroad. So we would see that number go down from 300,000 and to see these skills deployed in the domestic economy.
Follow Kaleidoscope on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn and stay in the loop.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Silingo Life.